Welcome to the High Income Business Writing Podcast, helping you propel your writing business to a whole new level. And now, here's your host, Ed Gandia.
Hey there, welcome back to the High Income Business Writing Podcast, the number one podcast for freelance writers, copywriters, and solo marketers who want to earn more in less time doing work they love for better clients, with over 1.3 million downloads from listeners just like you across 101 countries. I want to start today's episode with a question. What if you had superpowers? I'm not talking about flying. I'm not talking about X-ray vision or any of that. I'm talking about real practical superpowers, the kind that would make you dramatically more capable in your professional life. The ability to instantly access deep expertise you don't have, to fill knowledge gaps in real time, to execute complex tasks that used to require specialists you couldn't afford. Wouldn't that be amazing? Well, that's pretty much what AI can give you to a large degree if you know how to tap into it. Now, bear with me because I know that sounds like hype. You've heard bold claims about AI before. Maybe you've been burned by some of this hype cycle, but what I want to share with you today isn't hype. It's a framework that's been quietly changing how the best professionals work. And once you see it this way, you just can't unsee it. And I want you to keep an open mind for the next few minutes. Stay with me. This is very easy to dismiss. It's very easy to brush off as it start making excuses why it wouldn't work for you, or maybe why that particular example is not relevant to you or your situation. This requires a certain level of imagination and, again, an open mind. And if you do that, I think by the end of the episode, I think you're going to look at AI and at your own work very differently. So let's get into it. All right. Every professional has gaps. You know that. I have gaps. You have gaps in your knowledge, your experience, your capabilities. These are things that you don't know how to do, or that would take you forever to learn, or that fall outside your zone of expertise. And that's just reality. Nobody's good at everything. We all have these kind of limitations and bottlenecks. And historically, when you hit one of those gaps, you had two options. Option one, you could learn the how. So you could go figure it out yourself. You could take a course, you could watch tutorials, you could read books, you could do all those things. And you'd slowly build the skill doing it that way from scratch. And that's honorable, nothing wrong with that, but it's also expensive, it's time consuming. And that's the currency you never get back, right? Time. So time is the biggest one. There's also the resources required to buy the courses and so forth. And there's also the opportunity cost, right? If you spend a year, let's say, learning something, that's a year that you didn't learn other things. And that's a year where you weren't able to capitalize on that knowledge because you weren't able to use it yet. So that's option one. Option two, you can find the who. So meaning you find someone who already has that knowledge and that experience. You hire someone, you bring in a specialist, a consultant, a subcontractor, a vendor, someone who already has that capability that you need. They've spent the time, they've spent the money, the energy, the trial and error. And this is a great option. The challenge, though, just like with anything, there are some downsides in it. There are some complications. There's cost, there's availability, there's coordination. There is finding them, right? Sometimes it's like, who do I even look for? Where do I find them? Handoff problems, the overhead of managing someone. Now, I'm not saying this isn't a great option. It's often the best option of the two, but there's now another option because things have changed. Now, for most of my career, I will say this was the whole menu, option 1 and 2, right? Learn the how or find a who. And you have to pick one. And for solo professionals, that's always felt like an unfair constraint because big agencies and corporations could afford to build whole teams with diverse capabilities. They had the resources to do that. They still do. Most of us have been operating with a relatively narrow set of skills, plus whatever we could scrape together from freelancers and vendors and whatever time and resources we could go ahead and invest in learning something new. But that has changed, and it has changed radically because today, and you see where I'm going with this, AI can be the most powerful who you've ever had access to. Think about what that actually means. This is a who that's available 24 hours a day. Doesn't charge by the hour. It doesn't have scheduling conflicts. It can work across dozens of disciplines at once. It gets better every month. And when you get good at directing it, and that does take time, that's a skill, it fills gaps in your knowledge and your capabilities that used to require a whole team or a lot of time and resources to be able to deploy. And that's not a small thing. That's a fundamental shift in what one person can do. And what's made this even more true today is the massive improvement in the quality of the models since December of last year, so December of 2025. So depending on when you're listening to it. Honestly, the capabilities of these models have jumped dramatically since then. There's been a step change here that you can just feel. So even though the changes were significant before, every 30 to 60 days, the change we have seen over the past couple of months has been pretty dramatic. Now, before I show you what this idea looks like in practice, deploying AI as really the best who you ever had, I want to share a story. And it's not my story. It came from Dean Jackson, who's a mentor of mine. He's a marketing genius. And he shared this story on Facebook recently. And it's stopped me cold when I read it because it beautifully captures the exact mindset shift that I want you to make. And I'm going to share this with you because it's just another way for you to maybe understand where I'm coming from and how I'm framing this and how I'm thinking about it. And it may still not resonate, and that's okay. Listen, again, I want you to just kind of keep an open mind. Nothing I'm sharing with you today is an absolute, okay? So I need you to understand that for a few minutes, it would be useful for you to look at this from a different angle. So Dean wrote about an interview he once saw with Quentin Tarantino on the Charlie Rose show. And that was many years ago. He was talking about, Tarantino was talking about a while back in his early days. He was having lunch with one of his hero directors, someone who's known for creating beautifully crafted films. And he asked this question that had been bothering him. He said, "How do you get your vision onto the screen so perfectly?" And the director didn't hesitate. He said, "That's not your job. Your job isn't to get the vision onto the screen. Your job is to get the vision into the minds of the cinematographer, the lighting director, the set designers, the people who know how to create the mood, the environment, the feeling. None of those things are your job. Your job is to describe the vision." And Tarantino said that this realization changed everything for him. It allowed him to relax and to lean fully into the one thing he was best at. So Dean Jackson's takeaway when he shared this is that, and by the way, I think he nailed it. And I'm going to quote exactly what he said. He said, "There has never been a better time to be a visionary than right now. Our job is to get clear on the vision and get really good at describing it." That's exactly the mental model I would encourage you to bring to AI. Your job is not to execute every piece of work yourself. Your job is to be clear on the outcome you want, describe it well for yourself first, and to then direct the resources available to you toward making it happen. Those resources used to be a team of specialists. Now, for many tasks, not all of them, I want to be clear about that. For many tasks, for some tasks, those resources include AI. And the better you get at describing what you want, at getting the vision into the mind of the AI, if you will, the more powerful this becomes. So with that, let's make this concrete because I don't want this to stay too abstract, but I needed to set the stage first because it's very important that if you're going to really leverage this idea and these models, that you think about them a little bit differently and you see them as just amazing gaps that can be closed, tools that can help you close these gaps in a way that you couldn't do before at this scale, at least not cost effectively like you can with AI. So let's look at a couple of examples. The first example is what I would call the researcher you never had. And let's just say that you're a freelance writer who's landed a project in an industry you don't know deeply. So maybe it's because you move around. Maybe you're not a generalist, but you work for a few different industries and you just had an opportunity through a referral in an adjacent industry, one that's adjacent to one that you've done a lot of work for. So you kind of understand it, but let's just say you don't really know it deeply. And you now have to write a white paper for this industry. And let's just say that it's a financial technology company, just to give it a little bit of nuance. The topic is complex, the audience is sophisticated, and you have 2 weeks to deliver something that sounds authoritative. Now, back in the old days, you'd spend the first 3 or 4 days just doing research, pulling articles, wading through reports, trying to get smart enough to write with confidence, or maybe you'd hire a researcher, which costs money, right? And introduces coordination overhead. Either way, you're burning time before you've even written a single word. I mean, I can tell you, just as a quick aside, I found myself in, this is at least 2 or 3 times in situations like this, where I would buy 1 or 2 like full-length books just to get up to speed on certain concepts or industries, just to be able to have that background to be able to do a good job in a white paper. That was not unheard of. I did this at least 2 or 3 times. And in one case, I think I bought 2 full-length books, which I read at record speed because I needed to get up to speed very, very quickly. That's extremely time consuming. There's a lot of pressure because this isn't even, you haven't even begun the research. It's just for you to get up to speed. So anyway, that's the old world. The new world, you basically describe what you need. You feed AI the assignment brief, tell it the target audience, explain the angle you're taking, and ask it to synthesize the relevant landscape. Now, it doesn't happen in one prompt. I'm not suggesting that. But after a series of smart, layered prompts and some back and forth, some deep research, you get back organized outputs, key concepts, explain common objections in the space in a really solid understanding of what it's all about, the terminology you can use correctly, and you can do all of this in a couple of hours. That's just mind-boggling. Now, obviously, you're not going to copy and paste the output, okay? So please bear with me. I'm not suggesting, okay, that's it, you're done with the research, and everything it gives you is perfect. You bring your editorial judgment. You bring your sense of what the client actually needs, your knowledge of how to structure an argument for that specific audience. You're still the director, the orchestrator. AI handled the research legwork, so you could spend your time on the strategic thinking, the writing, the quality control. That's all your zone of genius. The gap that used to require a research specialist, or for you to become a research specialist, well, that's now been filled. And you're delivering better work because you're not as exhausted and rushed after 3 full days of research and even reading maybe 1 full-length book just to kind of get up to speed on things. All right, so I hope that's a good illustration. Again, let's not get caught up on the details there. I'm just trying to give you a sense for what this might look like in the real world. So let's look at another example. The strategic thinking partner. So this is a different scenario. You're working with a client who needs a workshop curriculum for their marketing team. And the topic is content strategy. And you're a strong writer and you understand the content well. They've come to you because they feel that you do a great job with this. And they've asked, hey, are you willing to do this? I think you'd be able to work real well with their team and give them a good primer on this topic. And they trust you. And you have rapport with the team, but your concern is that you've never designed a multi-day workshop before. Instructional design isn't your area of expertise. The curriculum structure, the facilitation flow, how to sequence exercises for adult learners, All those things are outside your wheelhouse. Now, what would have happened back in the day? Back in the day, I mean, like just months ago. You would either pass on the opportunity, which is the most likely after working with freelancers for 17 years. I can tell you, this would have been, most of the people I've ever worked with, if they don't feel that they have mastery or a very high degree of competence, they're just going to pass on it. And of course, if you do that, you miss out on the income. Or back in the day, you'd also maybe say yes. Some people do and would, but you would fake it till you make it. You would fake it and hope the client didn't notice your shortcomings. Or you could bring in an instructional designer at your own expense, which of course now makes this less viable because it kills your profit margin. So that was the old world. Let's talk about today, the new world. You describe the workshop goals, the audience, the outcomes you're trying to achieve, and the time available to the AI. And then you ask the AI to help you think through a curriculum structure. You do this through a series of steps and layered prompts, not all at once. Again, this takes some back and forth. The end result is a smart framework you can react to. You push back on some elements, you ask it to adjust the pacing, you request that it add more interactivity, and day two, you iterate, all that stuff. Now, again, you're not abdicating your judgment. You're instead using AI as a thinking partner who can rapidly generate options that you can then evaluate, refine, and make your own. The expertise gap is filled. You show up to that project with confidence that you didn't have before. And a key point that I want to make here is that these examples, and I can name dozens of these because I've done some of these things myself over the past year or two as a result of having AI as a thinking partner. But I'm not talking about domains that are way out there. I'm talking about things where once you look into them, you have enough understanding, knowledge, experience, judgment to be able to evaluate the results. I find that once you start working with a topic like this with AI and you get the results, you're able to make decisions. You're able to quickly grasp some of these elements and topics and fundamentals and some of the principles in the cause and effect of how something works. So that's what I'm referring to. I'm not talking about, now you have to do a presentation on quantum physics and understand it at a fundamental level. That might be completely outside your ability to deliver. I'm talking about most of the things we come in contact with, which would be things we may have to just pass on or hire somebody for, or find some other way. And that's what I'm suggesting is finding some other way. You have that way now. This is what I mean by AI is your most powerful who. Finding the right who rather than figuring out how or passing on the opportunity. So here's the reframe I want you to sit with. To thrive in the coming years, you're going to need to reimagine your business. I firmly believe that. And part of this will very likely require you to work with AI and get exceptionally good at three things with these tools: describing what you want, directing the process, and applying your own judgment to the output. That's the visionary role that Tarantino stepped into when he stopped trying to personally solve every production problem. And he realized that that wasn't his job and he needed to focus on his zone of genius. He got clear on the vision. He described it. He trusted the people around him to execute it while he focused on what he could do, what he only could do. The one thing, the handful of things that were really in his zone of genius. You have that same opportunity today. When you stop trying to fill every gap yourself and instead direct AI to help you fill those gaps, you free up the mental space and the time to do your best work, your actual work, the work that requires your specific perspective and your taste and your relationship with a client, your judgment about what's going to land and so forth. And something interesting happens when you operate that way. You get more creative. You deliver better outcomes. You can take on more ambitious projects because the overhead has dropped dramatically. And when I mean overhead, I'm not just talking about financial overhead. I'm talking about mind share. I'm talking about the cognitive load. This is all about being strategic. with your most valuable asset, which is your focused attention. And again, I can't stress this enough. This requires an open mind. It requires a totally different approach and a different model to approaching your work and your business. Now, I recognize that some people listening to this are probably going to dismiss it because they'll think, well, I'm not a visionary. I don't want to provide advice or strategic help or guidance or direction or help coordinate or help with project management. I just want to write my own stuff for my own clients without relying on AI. I'm just a writer. I just want to write. And look, if that's you, I respect that. I think there'll always be a niche for that approach, but I also predict that it's going to get way, way harder to stick to that approach. I predict that you will still need to change your business model and approach your business very differently than you do today because the disruption is coming. It's already happening and it's going to get worse. And you're going to have to be very thoughtful about how you adapt to it. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm just saying something is coming. And if there's one thing I would bet everything on is the fact that you can't continue to do things the way you always have and still have a viable business with that same model in 5 years. With that timeline, I would be willing to put a lot of money on that bet. So if you're open to this idea, if you're willing to explore some paths, even if you don't entirely commit to these paths yet, here's where I want to land this episode. Think about the gaps in your current work, not in a discouraging way. Just honestly, think about where you hit walls. Where do you slow down because you don't know enough or because you would need a specialist you can't afford? Where do you wish you had someone to bounce ideas off at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday? Those are your superpowers waiting to be unlocked and unleashed. I would suggest that you pick one gap, just one. I'm talking about an area where AI could function as your handy dandy who. Then spend a week pushing on that hard. Don't dabble. Don't just ask it a few questions and give up when the first answer isn't perfect. Treat it like you're onboarding a new team member. Give it context. Be fair to it. Be specific about what you need. Iterate on that output. The first result is not going to be great, and that's normal. The 10th result, after you've given it more context and refined how you're describing what you want, is going to be much better. And that's just the learning curve. And even though it's a learning curve, I would argue that it's shorter than you think. Now, two more things. The first is you need, and I'm going to stress this again, you need to have a wild imagination here. I keep hearing people tell me this, and I keep reading it on LinkedIn. People feel like they only have one or two paths. Like this is a binary choice. I either have to go all in on this or I'm going to refuse it. I am starting to hear more nuance, but not much. Now there's three paths. I can combine two things and create a third one. That is still a very, very limiting belief. I would argue that the possibilities for you are actually limitless, and that is not hyperbole. You can create and you can do whatever you want to do. I wouldn't have said this 2 years ago. I would have said that there's possibilities, but I wouldn't have ever imagined that today, this is not a year or two from now, you would be able to have these kind of superpowers and be able to do whatever you want. You really do have that capability. I firmly believe it, but it's up to you, your set of beliefs, and your imagination. Second thing is subscribe to the paid versions of these tools. Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini. Look, I have no vested interest in these tools. I'm not an investor in them. I would recommend you pick two and pay for two. The free versions are fine for casual use, but they're not going to show you what these tools can really do. The paid versions have the latest models and far fewer usage limitations. Think of it as an investment in your own capability because that's exactly what it is. These tools are $20 a month. Two of them is $40 a month. It's the biggest no-brainer on earth if you're serious about expanding your capabilities and really just changing the trajectory of your business for the better. Now, look, as we close this, for most of your career, again, your professional capability has been bounded by what you personally know and by what specialist you could access or afford. Those constraints were real, they were significant. They're not gone, but they're dramatically smaller than they used to be. AI is the most powerful who that most of us have ever had access to. It fills knowledge gaps, it generates options, it handles production work, and functions as a thinking partner at any hour of the day. When you direct it well, it will amplify everything you bring to the table. And I've said this many times before, and I'll say it again. This is the dumbest and least capable these tools will ever be. I don't know what's coming down the pipe, but it is going to be even better. The capability of these models is doubling every 6 to 7 months. Doubling. Not getting incrementally better, doubling. Do the math, and you'll see how quickly that compounds. Your job, again, is to get good at describing the vision, to be clear about what you want, to apply your judgment, your taste, your expertise, your lived experience to the output. That's the director's role. That's the visionary's role, and that's incredibly valuable. A 22-year-old with the same tools can't match your capabilities because they don't have your years of lived experience, of setbacks and challenges and opportunities and scar tissue and all that nonsense. All they have is AI, which is great. It's still a very powerful tool. But you have both your strong sense of judgment, creativity, taste, perspective, and intuition, and you have AI. So look, go find your superpowers because they're closer than you think. Thanks for listening. Now go out there and build something great. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And just a quick reminder to grab your free copy of my latest book, Earn More in Less Time: The Proven Mindset, Strategies, and Actions to Prosper as a Freelance Writer. You can get your free copy at b2blauncher.com, where you will also find the detailed show notes to this and all my other episodes. Enjoy and have a great day.